Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Darshan Talks. I'm your host, Darshan Kulkarni. It's my mission to help you trust the products you depend on. As you know, I'm an attorney, I'm a pharmacist, and I advise companies with FDA-regulated products. So if you think about drugs, wonder about devices, obsess over pharmacy, now this is the live stream for you because we're going to be talking about a lot of that today. I do have to specify that I am an attorney, but I'm not your attorney. My guest and I are both pharmacists, but we're not your pharmacist. So this is neither legal advice nor clinical advice. I do these live streams because they're a lot of fun. I get to talk to cool people like my guest today. I find myself learning something new every single time. But it would be wonderful to know if someone's actually listening. So if you like what you hear, please leave a comment, please subscribe. And if you'd like to ask our guest questions, please feel free to do so. I know I have a ton of questions already, and we haven't even started yet. But if at the end of this conversation you actually enjoyed the conversation, please share the video. We would appreciate that. I do have to specify that these are considerations and they don't necessarily reflect the views of my guest or myself. But these are fun and educational things to talk about. If you want to find me, you can always reach me on Twitter at Darshan Talks, or just go to our website at darshantalks.com. Today's live stream is a really interesting conversation because we're going to be talking about data aggregation and patient centricity. And this is critical in the world of the emerging world of patient centricity, but you're tying into this element of medical affairs, insights into patients, understanding what patients are looking for, what are pharmacies doing, and data aggregation and the privacy elements that come along with that as well. So if you care about any of those topics, if any of those seem interesting to you, I have a feeling you might enjoy today's conversation. Our guest today is a pharmacist and is the co-founder and president of Cassian RX, which some of you may have heard of. I know I have. So this should be a really fun conversation. Our guest for today, Dr. Collin Wolf. Hey, Collin, how are you?
Hey, Darshan, how are you?
I am good. I'm excited to have you. And I appreciate you taking the time because I know you're in the middle of, well, basically what I would refer to as lifting the world, because there is so much you're working on right now. So I'm using this in a general sense, lifting the world. Let's actually put that into practice, explain what that actually means. So tell us first of all, what is Cassian RX and what are you working on right now?
Absolutely. So Cassian RX has always had the vision of delivering for pharmaceutical manufacturers what they're looking for out of their specialty pharmacy. And if that doesn't exist today, we use embedded software to make that happen. And on the opposite side of the coin, we do the same thing for specialty pharmacies, right? So we help specialty pharmacies offer the things that they previously couldn't offer. And most of that comes from patient centricity and reporting. So the task that we are embarking on currently is deploying a specialty program. I think my most recent count is 500 unique disease states and drugs in the specialty side, where once we go live in the middle of November, we will be seeing each patient at that pharmacy having their own unique care program, right? So from a digital perspective over text and email, each patient has their own personalized and customized disease state engagements across refills, data collection, clinical assessments, payment options, you name it. And the whole thing is oriented to offer manufacturers deeper and more powerful insights.
I can tell you've had this spiel more than a few times because you were confident and you knew exactly what you were trying to say. So let's talk a little bit about that, where you're talking about creating these care programs. How does one come up with a care program at a digital level? Because all we hear about is this has to be personalized, this has to be unique. There's no way you can digitize this because each person's different. So how do you do something that we've always thought was difficult to do?
Right. So we take the approach from outcomes and we go backwards, right? So we go to manufacturers and we go to specialty pharmacies and we say, what are your biggest problems and how can we solve the largest one first? So the largest problem we're seeing at the specialty pharmacy level goes down to operational efficiency. And when you think about the things that are chewing up most of the specialty pharmacy's time, those things go into clinical assessments, refills, and patient management. And when a pharmacy is overworked, and if they're if they're providing more resource than perhaps isn't allowing them to scale, then we would like to alleviate that burden. So when we are offering care programs, we think about first what's going to enable this pharmacy to always deliver premier care, because we know pharmacists do what they do best, and that's direct patient interaction. So we lighten the load, right? And that involves automating the refills and going deeper on the refills. So we're actually solving a lot of the patient problems. So we're thinking about what are the additional supplies they need? What are the additional OTCs they need? How can we learn based on where they are in their refills remaining as to what is the most pertinent trigger today? And then we dive deeply into the clinical component, right? So if we are providing that pharmacist with a very clear understanding of how that perhaps a non-small cell patient is progressing, then that pharmacist, when they have that interaction with that patient, they can dive deeper and resolve more issues as opposed to just doing that first assessment and using all their time in that initial assessment, right? And then that's where we get to go deeper and understand more and provide more insights.
So, I mean, that sounds great as a concept, but here's my question. If you have pharmacists who are doing that, and as you said, you're relieving some of the pressure off of automating refills and by automating refills and the like, you're now getting the pharmacists to actually do what they do best, which is engaging with patients and helping them. But do you worry that as pharmacists start doing more of that, they'll be able to see less patients? I mean, as you start moving away from the lick, stick, count, pour model, if you will, to the actual direct patient engagement model, the number of patients who are actually served will actually drop. And right now, as you know, pharmacists don't get reimbursed. So how does that play into the whole process?
Right. Yeah, we see it as providing the most pertinent information always at your fingertips. So instead of logging into a dashboard and having no information, then you have to capture and triage, right? We're stratifying patients. So you can immediately log in and see your highest risk patients at the top, the patients that are reporting. I'm not saying it's a guarantee that they have no issues, but so far so good type of situations. And then we provide the data as patients are reporting it to us, right? So we see it as, since you are eliminating that first pass, which is what we're doing on the digital side, we believe that the pharmacist is able to do more and provide stronger care, right? I'm sure you've been to the doctor recently where you go, hey, my back hurts, and they grab your head and left, right, up, down. Okay, get an X-ray.
Right.
We're trying to get rid of that kind of interaction. So we're trying to give them more time to focus on the problems that patients are reporting to us. So
I love the idea of that. I love the idea that pharmacists will play a more meaningful role in what they want to be part of. So what I find interesting about that is the fact that I just had a conversation yesterday about pharmacist burnout, and the fact that a lot of pharmacies right now are just basically like the pharmacies near me, the Walgreens near me has shifted over to no weekend hours, and the CVS near me, 3 of them shut down so that only 1 can stay open because there's just pharmacists going, I don't want to work this anymore. It's not worth it for me. Right. So my question for you is, do you see this to be a recruiting tool as well for pharmacists, or do you see that as a byproduct but not something that you're really targeting?
That's a really interesting question, because imagine pharmacy A, where the pharmacist and the technician are splitting this sort of responsibility. And having done this myself, being, calling patients to complete clinical programs and clinical assessments, it's a lot of time, and it's a lot of first pass, and it's a lot of, frankly, 1 out of 3 interactions are voicemails.
Yeah.
Right. And when you think about going to pharmacy school, when you think about providing a noble change for a population of people, you don't think about leaving voicemails all day, right? So when you have a system that is reaching out to patients in a way that understands the patient gets off at work at 5, so we can text them at 6, or we can, they can say, I'm busy right now, snooze, let's follow up tomorrow, or please contact me via email in these hours. We automatically customize that patient, the patient responds better, right? We get better responses that way, and we're not forcing our pharmacists to be leaving voicemails all day, because we're doing that first pass for them, right? And then when you get back to your original vision of what you wanted to be when you signed up for pharmacy school, I think you could be doing more and leaving less voicemails. So that's definitely part of it.
So as part of this this care program, what are the components of it? Talk me through an example of a care program.
Right. Yeah. So if we think about, let's talk about rheumatoid arthritis, right? And the first thing that you want to make sure is that the patient has completed their documentation to start therapy, right? So you have the components of the prior authorization. So over a digital medium, this could be something over text and email. You can provide that documentation to that patient instantaneously and provide them reminders or suggestions on how to complete it appropriately. The next thing is going to be that welcome packet, as I alluded to earlier, having them complete that process. And then they're starting on therapy, right? So you want to show them the shipment information as it arrives to their home for their first therapy. And then you want to ask them probably an initial triage of questions, which is, are you having any issues understanding the instructions for injecting medication? What is your baseline on a pain perspective, that we can start baselining and benchmarking your performance on this therapy. And then over a series of months, and we always customize our programs to our pharmacies and what the manufacturers are looking for, then we'll be reaching out for clinical assessments. We'll be reaching out for the right refill at the right time, making sure you have the right supplies, and then using all these insights to go deeper, right? So if you're missing fills, we would like to understand why and how. And we're not just trying to, pull questions out of you constantly. We're trying to help you, right? So, for example, if someone didn't fill a medication, we can ask them, is it because of payment? Is it because you don't think this is working for you? Is it because you're having a side effect that you haven't talked to your pharmacist about, right? So we use these inflection points and these flags as ways to help patients along, but then ultimately help them via this digital service.
So what I'm sort of hearing is you're taking a lot of the compliance issues out of. I say compliance because you talked a little bit about refills, you talked a little bit about maybe payment, all of those. So compliance issues is what I'm sort of clubbing that under. Do you see education as a huge portion of that?
Education is, and that's where we get specific at the drug level, right? So these assessments and these care programs go further, and this is also where we bring in the brand, right? Because the brand oftentimes has a lot of approved patient education materials. They spend a lot of time putting this together. We help linking those patients potentially into support programs. But once that patient's enrolled, you think about the highest level is autoimmune, then you have rheumatoid, and then you have the drug, and then you have that, manufacturer provided drug information and education. And then they get to see how often it's viewed. They get to see how often patients are utilizing that. And then also, usually pharmacies offer their own education. So there's areas and lots of opportunity to bring in many parties for that aspect as well.
Now, when you talk about education, what I hear you saying without actually saying it, and just to be clear, we've never rehearsed any of these questions. I actually have actual questions here. Are these necessarily in written form, or are you considering things like Siri?
Yeah, so right now we are doing things over the written form, but hey, that excites me a lot, right? So anytime that we are able to bring in additional data elements or additional ways to interact with patients, that's always an exciting place to be, right? So, this is in some ways visionary and in some ways beyond what most folks are thinking about, but things like Fitbit that provide real-time insights that we can be incorporating, things like Siri that you can ask a question and then it's this linking with the application, which is again over text and email, but then you can pull in, manufacturer approved content over voice, highly exciting stuff and things that we would be tremendously excited to take part of if someone wanted to do that with us.
So what I'm hearing you say is that you're building this program now. Talk to me about how you land up in a scenario where you're helping 500. By the way, we have a comment already from Janan saying, "Love the innovative ways to engage with patients." So you're already making friends as we continue here. So the question I have is, you said you're doing you're creating a program for 500 different products.
Right.
What type of scenario does that get pulled into? Like, how do you? Is it a bunch of Is it a manufacturer consortium? Is it a pharmacy chain kind of thing? Obviously, we don't need specifics, but like, how does that project work out?
Right. So if you think about it, there could be a specialty pharmacy that has their existing base specialty programs, and then you have affiliate sites, maybe at hospital locations, maybe at retail locations, and then on top of that, you have limited distribution relationships, right? And so this is the vision that we've always had, is building what we call an engagement engine, right? Where once you start the wheels turning, they're going, and you can start layering on additional opportunities and elements on top of it, right? So the engine that we built, as I alluded to earlier, we provide those buckets. So at the highest level, again, the same example: autoimmune, rheumatoid, drug specific, manufacturer specific. You set those rules for all the compounds offered by the pharmacy or the manufacturer, and then once you're integrated, then you set it in action, right? Where, patient A within a rheumatoid setting, they're getting these assessments, these refills. Patient B in a infectious disease setting, they're getting this additional set. So that's the beautiful part about automation, is that when you turn it on a system-wide level, which is what it's intended to be, then you can have system-wide efficiencies, system-wide insights. So that's the plan.
So you talk about system-wide, which is obviously the panacea of all of this. But when you're doing a system-wide rollout, do you think about maybe pulling in EHRs as well?
EHR is the next level of integration that we need. With EHR, as you can imagine, the trick is going deeper into what we would like to call areas of excellence, right? So you really need to go very far into very specific disease states from the EHR. And, top candidates for us are things like oncology, things like multiple sclerosis, anything that our clients would like to learn more about. And then we can also use these things to personalize engagements, right? So if you understand, based on a recent lab report or based on a recent patient interaction, that can be reflected in the way we interact with patients, right? So you have the pyramid of engagement, right? And then once you get to that drug specific level and that disease state level, going into the EHR to provide those insights is paramount. And that's where we're going. That's where I think most folks in the industry are also going. So
very cool.
Yeah.
So let's ask a different version of this question. One of the goals here is to get patients to be, quite bluntly, better, to be healthier, to take the steps that they can take to be in a better place. So right. So my question for you is, you're a digital guy. You followed things like Facebook and the trouble it's gotten into, primarily because they sort of use this technology like nudging. Have you heard the term nudging before?
Right. Yeah.
Okay. So if you're using things like nudging technology or nudging behaviors to cause an effect, in your opinion, as someone who designs these systems, do you think nudging has a role in compliance and healthcare, or from an ethical perspective, you think that that's just not a direction you want to take it down?
Right. So this might surprise you, and I don't know if we're ready for this, but I actually don't love being called, and I don't love being texted by every single service that I have. Right. I'm not looking to download all the apps. I'm not really an app guy. These are all things that I think make me uniquely qualified. And of course, we work closely with patients in the field and et cetera. But I think my responsibility and our responsibility is to provide the lightest and most gentle, I almost want to use that word nudge, but the right message at the right time, right? When you log into the service, when you sign up, I don't want to send you like ding, 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 ding. You've been enrolled in 16 different services, right? And you're like, what did I do? I really want it to be simple and light. And I think a lot of these, exactly, app overload. We don't want to download all the apps, right? So I think the thing that we do that, I would like to be appreciated for someday, and hopefully we'll get it right, and you always try to work to these things, is bring all these elements together, right? So you don't have to have download this to talk to your physician, download that to get your refill, download this for your clinical assessments, right? One pharmacy, that's your pharmacy. We send you a simple text. You click the link. You don't have to worry about downloading anything. We're not going to text you at the wrong time. This is the vision, right? So it's more so, how can we use intelligence to remove the over nudge as opposed to nudge, 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 and kind of bully you into a corner, which I'm sure we've all felt like before, right? That's
Very interesting.
Perspective. That's my perspective on it.
No, 100%. I think that's what I asked for, which was your perspective. I find it interesting that you mentally went to nudging being over nudging, which is a really interesting concept. I've had some guests who do nudging as well, and what they've explained to me is that the beauty of nudging is that you don't over nudge it. You actually do the right nudge at the right time when it's important. The question is, and this is something that people in healthcare always wonder about when I've had conversations with them, is should you feel like you were pushed into a behavior, even if it's good for you? And I don't know the answer to that question. On one hand, I like the idea that I'll just be healthier because I did something. But is that good enough? Like, is there a nudging behavior that'll get me to the gym faster, for example? I don't know. And is that a good thing? Probably, but yeah. So you talk a little bit about working with patients, and you mentioned it a few times, and goes back to that core principle of patient centricity. So can you talk a little bit about how you actually engage patients?
Yeah, so I think this is interesting. So one of the places that we started when we first developed Cassian is we had a product that housed and dispensed medications directly from the back of the patient's phone. So we at first were very technology and mechanical with our digital engagement, and it was a very exciting project. And we learned, that's mostly where we learned most of our insights in how we engage with people through. So I am from the University of Pittsburgh. I went to school there, and in Pittsburgh, we would partner with regional infectious disease clinics, and we would meet one-to-one with patients, and we would do studies, right? So we'd hand them our product and say, how does this make you feel, right? Do you want to use this? Is this something that would help you administer your medications on time? And a lot of these, just sitting down across the table, having a conversation, does this make you feel cool, or does this solve a problem, right? And that's always a very interesting question to ask, where it's like, oh, if I got this on my phone, now I'm cool, right? And that's a very different type of product versus I just use this because it's helpful to me whenever I want it to be, right? So having these very discrete understandings of what makes people feel cool, what kind of wording makes people feel like I don't want to be assessed right now. Like I just want to tell you what my problems, like my back hurts, right?
Yeah.
So there's a lot of these interactions that we gained from those early developments that we had that I think we bring forward into our current products.
Now, do you, obviously that worked when you were talking about one-on-one individual patients. Now you multiply that at scale, you've got 500 products, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of patients in play. In those situations, how do you still get input? Is it surveys? Is it still one-on-one conversations? How do you know you're talking to the right patient?
Right. Yeah. So there's a few things that we do at the product level to sit on top of, direct care that usually help us out with that initial reaction, because we know each population is different. And if our goal is to stratify, we want to understand, the population of rheumatoid arthritis patients in Arizona. You can't treat them the same as the ones in Massachusetts. And we would like to, understand how they think and how they would like to be interacted with, right? So usually early on in that assessment or engagement paradigm, We provide the patient a lot of opportunity to talk to us in open text. We have simple assessments, which is walking them through how to use the system, but also letting us know how they feel about the system and how things are going for them, right? So there's a lot of benchmarking early on. There's guiding, but then we use the guiding component of how to use the system as a learning opportunity as well, which is, what questions do you have remaining? There's like, I'm not sure if this is right for me, or I don't know if I can use this on my smartphone, or I'm actually helping my dad with his medications. Can I still use this, right? And that's places for proxy and those other sorts of programs. So the fun part is with patient interaction, you find everything in terms of the wrong person, it's the caregiver, it's the different relationship, it's for my child, I am the child. You have to have a system that can encompass all of it.
So I have a comment from a person you may know. Erica Devine asks, or comments, this is really interesting. With so many apps out there that use interactive tactics, targeted med ed, et cetera, to increase engagement. How do you differentiate?
Yeah, so this is interesting. So I had a conversation yesterday with a hospital system in Boston. And as far as I could tell, they had most of the leading services that I could find, right? And when I was interviewing the pharmacy director, who has a bunch of relationships, about how his patient engagement strategy is going, he says, I didn't have anything. I don't have any engagement on the digital side. And my question is, why is that? And because it doesn't work for my system. It doesn't work for my pharmacy or my team, right? So I think the way in which Cassian differentiates is we really spend that time sitting down with the pharmacy, with the manufacturer, with the team to make sure it's something that they will be used, right? We try to avoid the word dashboard because it doesn't involve you exactly logging into it and participating, right? So we embed the insights, we embed the patient interaction when and where care is taking place. And that takes usually more attention than providing a pre-templated product out there, right? So I think there's a lot of time and attention across the board that needs to be spent making sure these products do actually solve the problem that we set out to solve. So I'll leave it there. Yeah.
Very, very cool. So now let me ask you this. So you're engaging with these different pharma companies, different manufacturers. And again, I have to admit, to a man with a hammer, everything looks like a nail. So my first question from a legal perspective that I start thinking about is, how do you consider the type of information they give to you to be promotional? How do you make sure that they stay on point? Or do you sort of say, that's not my business, whatever they give to me is approved by their departments and that's good enough? How do you sort of draw the balance and what you're going to include and what you want?
Yeah, so similarly to you, where you are a lawyer, but not always your lawyer. I'm not, for Cassian, we are usually not the patient's pharmacist.
Right.
So when we receive things from the pharmaceutical company and it's approved by them, from our eyes, and contractually, that's the way the relationship goes. So we fortunately have not had to draw the line, but to your point, there still is a lot of concern and challenge from teams, especially when they are, there is medical affairs involved. There's, commercial endpoints that they would like to be seeing. There is a lot of reluctance, as you've talked about in many of your podcasts before, for pharmacies and manufacturers to take that next step. In my mind, it's kind of funny because you could have imagined that we would have had a cell phone in the future, something that would allow me to talk to you remotely, but I wouldn't have been able to tell you it's the iPhone.
Right.
So we all know it's going to happen. It's just exactly how it's going to happen is still somewhat unsettled, which I find exciting. So
very, very cool. Well, we can keep going. As you know, I aim for about 15, 20 minutes. I'm already at 30. So you're just an interesting guy and we can keep asking questions, but We've got to call it. So as you know, I got to ask you 4 questions before we go. The first question, and we've been pushing this out the whole time, but how can people actually reach you?
Yep. So my email is collin.wolf@CassianRx. Collin has 2 L's. I'm one of the few out there. Wolf spelled like the animal, and then Cassian, CASSIAN, RX.com. And then our website is CassianRx.com as well.
And how can people actually reach you as well? You will be presenting at Assembia.
Yeah, so we are exhibiting at Assembia late October. We will have a lot of materials and time to speak with many folks. So we are more than excited to be there and excited to talk to you there.
Perfect. Now, here's another question. What would you like to ask the audience?
Generally, my favorite question, and so a secret is when I was in pharmacy school, I had rotations.
Yeah.
And my rotations, my number one objective was to learn all of my preceptors' problems. So yeah, I would spend all day, what are you doing there? And why is that frustrating you? What are you doing there? And how is that taking up all your time? So I would become a download file of everyone's problems. So for pharmaceutical manufacturers, I would like to know what your biggest pain point is when it comes to patient insights or receiving data from a specialty pharmacy, and what you think could be an insightful data point to obtain.
I think I try to answer, obviously, from a legal standpoint. The big question that I would have, that I'd be thinking about is, how do I make sure I get the patient insights in a way that I'm not worried about HIPAA, for example? That might be one of the first things that comes to mind. The other things that start popping up in my head, if I was representing a pharmaceutical company, would be, how do I ensure that the type of information we're providing and the type of feedback we're providing does not necessarily constitute some kind of kickback? Right. And does that trigger, for example, the False Claims Act? And then from the finance perspective, the question I would start thinking about is there a definite ROI? Is there a definite return on investment for what I imagine is a pretty substantial investment to ensure that that you actually see, because you're doing this at scale. There are so many patients out there. I'd love to be able to know that my patients are being heard and their needs are being met. And it sounds like you're having those conversations, addressing each one of these as we go along. But that would be my answer that I'd be thinking about.
Right.
But I want to raise that.
Yeah, to your point, a great question is, from a compliance perspective, how can we make your life easier, right? You don't want to go to bed every night, thinking, oh, we're breaking some rules. How can we show you definitively that we're on the right side of the fence there, right? So that's another similar question.
So you and I can have a conversation about that at some point as well. Here's another question. What's something you've learned in the last month?
So this I find this very exciting. When you give me, I don't have a lot of time, but when I have any time, I immediately go to cooking channels and I get overexcited about things that I can make with food. So most recently, I have taken the dive into home wine making. So I inherited roughly 15 to 20 pounds of grapes. So I'm looking at a gallon of hand-squeezed grape juice, which will hopefully turn into wine. So yeah.
I think you just confessed to being a bootlegger, but okay.
I think maybe.
I don't really know. That is not the type of law I practice. I have no idea. That's awesome.
Yeah.
Here's my next question. What is something that made you happy in the last week?
I'll tell you. So I tasted the wine and it tasted good.
Did it really?
It really
That's
did.
awesome.
It is not actually. I'll say this. It wasn't as bad as I thought it could be. So
that's a really low bar.
We're on the right path. It's a very low bar, and I can probably pour it in some pasta if I'm making a sauce. Right.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Things like that. Table wine. Correct.
Very, very cool. Again, Collin, this was amazing. I really appreciate having you on. This was so much fun. I hope you'd consider coming back.
I'm coming back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, for those people who want to reach you again, you can go to his website, CassianRx.com, or they can actually reach you at collin.wolf@CassianRx.com. Thank you again for being part of this. By the way, we have one more comment. Pharmacist is equal to chemist. Good luck with the sauce. Well, there you go.
That's how we do it. Yeah.
There you go. Thanks again, Collin.
Darshan, you're awesome. Thank you.